Have you ever asked a simple question and received a response so overly detailed it made you wonder what they were hiding? Imagine this. You casually ask someone, "What time did you get home yesterday?" expecting a straightforward answer, only to be met with an elaborate story that feels more like an alibi than a conversation. Why do some people over-explain, and what does it really mean? What I'm about to share with you isn't just about words, it's about the unspoken truths that linger beneath them. This video will uncover the subtle clues people unknowingly reveal when they feel the need to lie or conceal something. It's not just about human behavior, it's about empowering yourself to notice the signs, trust your instincts, and uncover the truth before it's too late. My name is Celia, and I'm thrilled you're here. If this is your first time visiting, welcome to a space where we dive deep into life's emotional layers, those unseen nuances in relationships that can change everything. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time, because what you'll learn here goes beyond surface-level advice. It's wisdom that opens doors to clarity and understanding. Stick around until the end of this video. Together, we'll uncover why people over-explain, the psychology behind it, and how you can navigate these moments with confidence and clarity. Plus, I'll share actionable steps you can take to sharpen your perception, protect your heart, and strengthen your relationships. Let's dive in. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, I encourage you to click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay updated on all our latest content. I'm eager to hear your thoughts on today's topic. If you enjoy the content, please comment 1 below. If it doesn't resonate with you, leave a 0. Your feedback is crucial as it helps me create better videos that align with your interests. Now, let's get started. What I'm about to share with you is not just a glimpse into human behavior. It's a revelation that has the potential to transform how you perceive the words and actions of others. It's an invitation to sharpen your senses, to listen with your heart as well as your ears, and to uncover truths that may be hidden in plain sight before it's too late. My name is Celia, and I'm so glad you're here. If this is your first time visiting, welcome to a space dedicated to uncovering the emotional layers of life, those unseen nuances in relationships and everyday interactions that hold the power to change everything. Subscribe now, because what you'll learn here goes beyond surface-level advice. These insights can open doors to clarity and understanding that you won't find anywhere else. Let's dive into this together. Have you ever noticed how some people, when faced with even the simplest question, suddenly launch into elaborate, overly detailed stories? Imagine this. You casually ask someone, "What time did you get back yesterday?" expecting a straightforward answer. But instead, they deliver a detailed timeline that feels more like an epic tale than a simple response. "Well, I left at 8 because I had a meeting, then I swung by Laura's house, but I didn't stay long because her husband was watching the game. On my way home, I realized we were out of milk, so I stopped at the supermarket. And then I got home." You didn't ask for a play-by-play, did you? Yet here they are, flooding you with unnecessary details. Why? This kind of verbose response, especially when unprovoked, can be more than just a quirky personality trait. It's often a mask for something deeper, a way to hide a truth or divert your attention. Let me be clear, not every long-winded explanation is a sign of deceit. But when those endless words are laced with subtle anxiety, nervous fidgeting, or inconsistencies, it's worth paying attention. Psychology tells us that people who feel the need to lie or cover something up often overcompensate by adding unnecessary details. They think a well-crafted story, full of specifics, will sound more convincing. But here's the catch. The more they try to solidify their version, the less natural it becomes. I'll never forget a story shared by an old friend, Carlos. He once confided in me about a shift he noticed in his partner's behavior. In the beginning, her daily updates were straightforward. I went to work, then the gym, and came home. But as time passed, her responses grew more intricate. Suddenly, she was offering elaborate accounts of meetings, co-workers, and even the color of a colleague's tie. "It felt like she was trying to convince me of something," Carlos said, his voice heavy with the weight of hindsight. He didn't want to believe it at first, brushing it off as a harmless change in how she communicated. But deep down, something didn't sit right. It wasn't just the length of her stories, it was the nervous energy behind them. Her words, though detailed, felt rehearsed, and the more she spoke, the more questions he found himself asking. Shortly after, Carlos uncovered the painful truth. There was a fracture in their relationship that she had been trying to conceal. This isn't just Carlos's story, it's a reminder to all of us. Words are powerful, but so are silences, pauses, and the emotions that ripple beneath the surface. The next time someone offers you an explanation that feels oddly excessive, pause and listen, not just to the words but to what's left unsaid. Pay attention to their tone, their body language, and the energy behind their story. Life has a way of gifting us small signs, hints that whisper to us when something doesn't quite add up. The question is, are we listening? And more importantly, do we trust our intuition enough to act on what we sense? This isn't about sowing distrust or reading into every word someone says. It's about empowering yourself to notice the subtle clues that can protect your heart and guide your decisions. Because sometimes, the truth lies not in what's being said but in what's desperately being covered up. If you find yourself in a situation where someone's behavior triggers suspicion, such as offering excessive explanations or deflecting attention with accusations, it's important to behavior. What can you do when you notice this? The first step is to resist the temptation to confront her directly. Why? Because a direct accusation can lead to defensiveness, anger, or even more elaborate lies. Instead, your best move is to observe quietly, gathering evidence through her words, actions, and emotional cues. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Pay close attention to her body language. Does she seem restless or fidgety? Are her gestures overly exaggerated or subdued? Look for inconsistencies between her words and how she presents herself physically. For example, a calm story with nervous hands or darting eyes can indicate a mismatch. Notice her tone of voice. Is it steady, or does it fluctuate with nervous energy? Pay attention to pauses in her speech. Do they feel like natural moments to think, or do they seem like she's carefully choosing her words to craft a narrative? Another key clue lies in how her explanations evolve over time. A true story is straightforward, consistent, and doesn't require adjustments. But when someone fabricates or bends the truth, the story often changes as time passes or when details are revisited. They may add unnecessary embellishments or contradict themselves in ways they think you won't notice. If you're patient and observant, these inconsistencies will begin to reveal themselves. Now, here's a critical piece of advice. Resist the urge to ask too many questions. It might seem counterintuitive, but silence can be your strongest ally. People carrying guilt or hiding something often have an overpowering need to talk, to fill the quiet spaces with words, and to over-explain as a way of reinforcing their story. And ironically, it's in those moments of over-talking that they're most likely to slip up or reveal their true intentions. Silence makes them uncomfortable, and in their attempt to mask that discomfort, they may betray themselves. So, when someone starts offering long-winded explanations that you didn't ask for, don't rush to conclusions, but don't dismiss it either. It's not always a sign of deceit, but it is a signal that something may be amiss. And as I always remind my listeners, words can lie, but emotions never completely hide. The truth often resides in the undertones, in the things that are left unsaid, in the inconsistencies, and in the subtle unease that lingers in the air. Let's move on to another red flag that can be even more disorienting, the inverted question. This is a tactic some people use when they feel cornered or guilty. It's a form of psychological projection, where they shift the focus away from their own actions by turning the suspicion onto you. It's a subtle but powerful way to confuse and distract you, making you question yourself instead of them. Imagine this scenario. You've just come home after a long day, ready to relax. You greet her warmly, expecting a peaceful evening, but instead, you're met with an unexpected accusation. Why have you been acting so strange lately? Are you hiding something from me? The tone of her voice is sharp, her words heavy with suspicion. You're caught completely off guard. You haven't done anything unusual, yet the sudden accusation makes you feel uneasy. Before you even realize it, you're on the defensive, scrambling to justify yourself, trying to prove your innocence, even though you have nothing to hide. This tactic isn't random. It's an intentional or subconscious attempt to project guilt onto you, shifting the focus away from her own actions. By putting you on the defensive, she gains control of the narrative, making you feel as though you're the one under scrutiny. It's a clever way to divert attention and confuse your instincts, and it often works because most people's natural reaction to an accusation is to explain themselves. So, how do you handle this? The key is to remain calm and composed. Don't let the accusation provoke an emotional reaction. Instead of defending yourself, try to turn the question back around gently. For example, you might say, "I'm not sure what you mean by acting strange, but it's interesting that you feel that way. Is there something on your mind?" This approach does two things. It keeps the conversation neutral and shifts the focus back onto her without escalating the tension. It also gives you an opportunity to observe her reaction. Does she double down on her accusation, or does she deflect further? It's important to understand that this behavior often comes from a place of inner turmoil. People who use projection as a defense mechanism are usually struggling with their own guilt, fear, or insecurity. Their accusations are less about you and more about what's happening within them. Recognizing this can help you approach the situation with clarity and prevent you from being drawn into unnecessary arguments or self-doubt. Here's something crucial to remember. Accusations like these can plant seeds of confusion and make you second-guess your own reality. Don't let them. Stay grounded in what you know to be true and trust your instincts. If the accusation feels out of place or unprovoked, it's likely a smokescreen designed to shift attention away from something she doesn't want you to see. By observing calmly, listening carefully, and responding thoughtfully, you can navigate these moments with confidence and clarity. Remember, the truth has a way of surfacing when you create space for it to reveal itself. And often, it's the silences and pauses, the spaces between words, that speak the loudest. Keep your focus on what feels authentic, and don't be afraid to trust your intuition. It's one of the most powerful tools you have in uncovering the truth. And here's where the trap tightens its grip. While you're busy reassuring her, defending your actions, or clarifying things that don't even warrant an explanation, she successfully manages to divert your attention away from what's really going on beneath the surface. This redirection isn't accidental. It's a calculated move rooted in a psychological phenomenon as old as human relationships: projection. Projection happens when someone attributes their own feelings, fears, or actions onto someone else. It's a defense mechanism, often employed unconsciously, that allows the person to offload their guilt, anxiety, or discomfort onto another. If she's hiding something, she might use loaded questions or sudden accusations to make you feel uneasy, planting seeds of doubt in your mind and ensuring you don't scrutinize her actions too closely. Take a moment to reflect. Has she ever accused you of something out of the blue, seemingly without reason? Have you found yourself justifying things you didn't even realize needed justification? These moments might leave you feeling disoriented, wondering why you're being put on the defensive over something so trivial or unfounded. Here's the truth you need to hear, dear. Her accusations aren't really about you. They're about her, about the things she doesn't want you to notice, the emotion she's wrestling with, or the secret she's trying to keep buried. When someone accuses you without cause, what they're actually doing is trying to soothe their own guilt or anxiety by deflecting it onto you. So, what's the most important thing to do in these moments? Don't take the bait. If you notice that her accusations come out of nowhere or are accompanied by a strange attitude, perhaps she seems unusually tense or avoids direct eye contact, pause. Resist the urge to react defensively. Instead, step back emotionally and listen, but don't immediately respond. For instance, if she suddenly says, "Why are you always on your phone?" when you've done nothing out of the ordinary, avoid rushing to justify yourself. Take a deep breath, maintain a calm demeanor, and reply with something like, "What do you mean? I've been the same as always." This type of response does two powerful things. It keeps you grounded and in control of your emotions, and it gently challenges her to explain herself. Often, when someone using projection is forced to elaborate, their reasoning begins to unravel, and you'll see cracks in the narrative. Projection works because it preys on our instinct to defend ourselves, to prove our innocence, and to clear up misunderstandings. But here's the danger. This guilt, unfounded as it may be, can cloud your judgment and distract you from the real issue. That's why it's crucial, when faced with a sudden or misplaced accusation, to take a moment to ask yourself, does this even make sense? Is there any truth to this, or is it a distraction? Remember, words have the power to shape perceptions, but they can never fully obscure the truth. It's in the inconsistencies, the unexplained details, and the nervous energy behind someone's accusations that the truth begins to emerge. Your role isn't to unravel their story in that moment. It's to stay composed, observant, and patient. Over time, the real intentions will reveal themselves. When something doesn't feel right, you don't have to confront it immediately. Instead, trust the power of quiet observation. Watch for patterns, listen to the subtle shifts in her tone, and pay attention to what her actions say, not just her words. People can manipulate language, but their true feelings often seep through in the spaces between their sentences. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Ultimately, it's the small details that will guide you to the truth. So, don't let guilt or doubt cloud your perception. Hold steady, stay calm, and trust that in time, the truth will always find its way to the surface. Speaking of details, let's delve even deeper into the significance of silence and how it can reveal more than words ever could. Silence is often seen as harmless, a natural pause in conversation, but in the context of deception, it becomes something entirely different. It's not just the absence of sound, it's a moment of hesitation, of internal struggle, where the truth is weighed against a lie. This brings us to the third and often overlooked sign of infidelity, the silence before the lie. Lying doesn't come naturally to most people. It's a complex cognitive process. Before a person can tell a convincing lie, they must prepare mentally. They have to process the question, consider the truth, and then construct a believable narrative that suppresses that truth. This mental effort, while often happening in milliseconds, leaves subtle but noticeable traces. And silence, the kind that lingers just a moment too long, is often the first clue that something isn't quite right. Imagine you ask what seems like an innocuous question, "Where were you this afternoon?" Instead of receiving an immediate, straightforward response, there's a pause, just a second or two, but enough to feel unnatural. She might take a small breath, look away momentarily, or remain completely still, as though frozen in time. It's not just the pause itself that's revealing, it's the tension that fills the space, a kind of heavy silence that feels louder than any words could. This moment is her internal mechanism stalling as she tries to decide how to respond. Have you ever experienced that? That moment that makes your gut twist, even if you can't articulate why? This kind of silence isn't accidental. Psychology tells us that lying requires significant mental effort. The brain must suppress the truth, generate a plausible alternative, and deliver it in a way that sounds natural. But here's the catch. While the mind is busy crafting the lie, the body often betrays the person. This is where the pause comes in, along with the little tells that accompany it. A quick glance away, a nervous fidget, or even a too perfectly calm demeanor. These micro-behaviors are subtle, but they're the moments where the truth hides. Picture a scenario. You're sitting at the dinner table, enjoying a quiet meal together. The conversation flows naturally, light and easy. Then, without much thought, you ask, "Who was texting you so much today?" What happens next is telling. She might smile, as if the question doesn't bother her, but instead of answering immediately, she takes a sip of water, adjusts her hair, or says something like, "What do you mean?" to buy time. These actions, though small, aren't insignificant. They're her way of stalling, her body's attempt to keep pace with the mental effort of lying. But let's be fair, not every pause signals dishonesty. Some people are naturally more reflective in their communication, taking a moment to think before they speak. The key lies in the context and the accompanying behaviors. A pause on its own is not necessarily suspicious, but when paired with actions that deviate from her usual patterns, avoiding eye contact, shifting in her seat, or suddenly appearing overly preoccupied with a minor detail, it becomes worth noting. These changes in behavior often occur when someone is trying to manage their guilt or anxiety while maintaining control over their narrative. Let's go deeper into what happens during these pauses. When someone hesitates before answering, it's often because their brain is caught between conflicting desires, the need to lie convincingly and the instinct to tell the truth. This internal battle creates a momentary lapse in their usual flow of communication. That pause, combined with subtle shifts in body language, like a tightened jaw, a fleeting frown, or a change in tone, can reveal far more than they intend. Here's another example. You ask, "Why were you so late coming home?" If her response is genuine, it might come quickly, with details that feel natural. "There was so much traffic on the way back. It was awful." But if there's hesitation, followed by an overly elaborate story or vague deflections, it's worth paying attention. She might start with a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes, take an unnecessary sip of her drink, or offer a rehearsed-sounding explanation. These behaviors aren't just random. They're her brain trying to align her story with what she believes you'll find believable. What can you do when you notice these pauses and behaviors? The most important thing is to stay calm. Don't immediately confront her or react defensively, as this can escalate the situation and make her even more guarded. Instead, take a mental step back and observe. Pay attention to how she handles similar questions in the future. Does this pattern repeat? Do her stories change over time? The consistency, or lack thereof, will often reveal more than a direct confrontation ever could. For instance, if she avoids eye contact or changes the subject, resist the urge to press her further. A calm response like, "I was just curious, but if it's not important, we can move on," can disarm her and sometimes even encourage honesty. On the other hand, if her behavior becomes defensive or overly detailed, let her talk. People who lie often try to fill silences with unnecessary information, and in doing so, they may inadvertently expose inconsistencies. The silence before a lie is a subtle yet powerful indicator of inner conflict. It's a space where the truth briefly struggles to emerge before being smothered by a carefully constructed story. And while it's easy to overlook, especially in casual conversations, it can be one of the most revealing signs of deception. But you must approach these moments with patience and clarity. Don't let your emotions cloud your judgment, and don't rush to conclusions. Instead, use these moments as opportunities to observe, to listen not just to her words but to the silences and gestures that accompany them. Ultimately, it's not the words themselves that reveal the truth but the spaces between them, the pauses, the hesitations, the subtle shifts in tone or demeanor. These are the moments that speak volumes. Over time, if something doesn't feel right, trust your instincts. Lies may temporarily distort reality, but they can never fully erase the traces of the truth. If you remain observant and composed, the truth will eventually come to light, no matter how deeply it's buried. A wise man understands the power of silence, not only in his own words but in the pauses and hesitations of others. He listens intently, knowing that silence often speaks louder than any explanation. However, wisdom also means restraint. It's crucial not to confront these silences immediately. If you observe these signs, the best course of action is to let the conversation flow naturally rather than pressuring her for answers. Pay attention to the cracks in the narrative. Stay alert for inconsistencies. A well-constructed lie might hold up once, but lies are inherently fragile. When repeated, they almost always show signs of wear and tear. What seemed plausible the first time can start to unravel when details shift, explanations contradict, or the energy behind the words changes. And remember, Silence doesn't just happen before someone speaks. It can also interrupt the middle of a response. For example, if she begins to explain something but pauses unexpectedly, struggles to find the right words, or offers a response that feels overly rehearsed or out of place, take note. These are subtle cues that her brain is working behind the scenes, trying to manage the conflict between the truth and the story she wants to tell. These pauses aren't random. They are spaces where the truth tries, and fails, to emerge. The power of remaining calm. The key here is to remain calm and composed. You don't need to interrogate her or demand answers immediately. Doing so can make her defensive, pushing her further into the fabricated narrative. Instead, allow the conversation to flow. Sometimes, simply giving her the space to keep talking reveals the cracks in the story. Lies, unlike the truth, require maintenance. And in the process of keeping a lie intact, inconsistencies almost always surface. As I always say, the truth doesn't need to be rehearsed or embellished. It flows naturally, effortlessly. Lies, however, carry the weight of the secrets they are meant to hide. They are cumbersome and fragile, and their artificial nature eventually exposes them. The just a friend defense. Now, let's move on to another telltale sign of deception. The phrase, "she's just a friend." On the surface, this might sound innocent, almost dismissive. But context is everything. Depending on how and when this phrase appears, it can carry a weight far greater than its casual tone suggests. Think about this. Has she ever started mentioning someone new, a coworker, a neighbor, a friend from a shared activity? At first, it seems harmless, even mundane. For example, she might casually say, "Marta helped me with the report today," or "Marta always has the best ideas." Perhaps it's, "Marta is such a good listener." It seems innocent enough. After all, we all talk about the people in our lives. But then, over time, you begin to notice something odd. The name Marta keeps coming up, and not just occasionally, but frequently. At first, it's during conversations about work or other routine topics. But then, the name begins to pop up at unexpected moments. Maybe she mentions Marta while sharing a joke or recounting a story from her day, even if Marta's role in the story isn't particularly significant. It's not just what she's saying, it's the sheer frequency of how often this person is mentioned that stands out. Actions speak louder than words. Sometimes, it's not only what she says but what she does. Imagine this. Suddenly, she seems to be receiving messages more often than usual. Her phone lights up frequently, but when you ask about it, she brushes it off with a casual, "Oh, it's nothing. It's Marta. We're just organizing something for work." Or perhaps one day, she comes home later than expected. When you inquire about her delay, she explains, "I was talking with Marta about the project." It all sounds reasonable on the surface, but there's something in her tone or body language that doesn't quite match the simplicity of her words. If this pattern continues, it's worth reflecting on the situation. Frequent mentions of the same person, particularly in unexpected contexts, can be a subtle way of preparing you for a truth she may not be ready to share. By bringing Marta into conversations repeatedly, she might be attempting to normalize this person's presence in her life, making it seem perfectly ordinary. But when paired with subtle behavioral changes, more frequent messaging, longer work hours, or unexplained absences, it's natural to question whether just a friend truly captures the full story. How to respond? When faced with these signs, the best approach is to remain composed and observant. Don't jump to conclusions or make accusations without evidence. Instead, pay attention to the patterns. Is this person's name coming up more often than seems typical? Do her stories about them seem to have small inconsistencies or shifts over time? Are her actions aligning with her words? These are the questions that matter. For example, if she says, "Marta and I were talking about the project," but later mentions a different reason for her late return, take note of the discrepancy. If her tone or body language changes when Marta is mentioned, consider what that might reveal. Often, it's not the content of the story that exposes the truth, but the subtle ways in which it's told. In moments of doubt, resist the urge to react impulsively. A calm demeanor gives you the advantage of clarity and allows you to gather more information without raising her defenses. Sometimes, the best course of action is simply to let her talk. Lies, by their nature, tend to unravel over time, especially when told repeatedly. Trust your intuition. Above all, trust your instincts. If something feels off, don't dismiss it. Our intuition is often the first line of defense against deception. Pay attention to the small details, the pauses, the shifts in tone, the moments of hesitation. These are where the truth often hides. While words can be crafted to manipulate perceptions, actions and patterns rarely lie. In the end, the truth doesn't need to be forced. It emerges naturally when given time and space. Lies, on the other hand, require constant effort to maintain. By staying observant and calm, you can allow the truth to reveal itself, whether in a misplaced pause, an inconsistent story, or the subtle ways her actions fail to align with her words. Trust yourself and trust the process. The truth always has a way of coming to light. Everything seems logical, but there's something about her tone or the details that doesn't sit right with you. The phrase, "she's just a friend," can be full of certainty, but it can also be used as a shield. When someone feels that a relationship might be questioned, they tend to get ahead of any suspicion, trying to calm the waters before questions arise. It's as if they want to make it clear there's nothing to see, but the insistence itself might make you raise an eyebrow. The issue isn't having friendships. That's normal and healthy. The real concern is when that friendship begins to replace the connection the two of you share. Maybe that person starts to take up an emotional space that once belonged to you. So, beyond what she says, pay attention to behavioral changes. Does she stop sharing things she used to tell you? Is she more distracted or distant when you're together? Does she avoid letting you see her phone when she gets messages from that person? These small details can reveal more than any words. This type of situation doesn't always indicate something physical. Many times, the problem is emotional. Sometimes, when a relationship loses its initial spark or becomes too routine, one person looks for someone else to fill that void. They don't always do it consciously, but that emotional refuge can be dangerous territory. What can you do if you feel something isn't right? If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment number 3 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. The first step is to stay calm. Direct confrontations full of accusations only create tension and push the other person away. Instead, express your concerns openly, like this: "I've noticed you've been talking about Marta a lot lately. Is everything okay between us?" This type of conversation not only opens the door to dialogue, but also shows that you're willing to listen and understand. Of course, it's also important to reflect on your own relationship. Sometimes, suspicions aren't just born from what the other person is doing, but from what you feel is missing. If the connection between you two has changed, if you've stopped spending quality time together or talking as often, it's a good time to ask yourself if there's something you can do to improve the dynamic. This doesn't mean you should ignore your feelings. If her explanations don't match what you observe, pay attention. Lies, no matter how well constructed, tend to fall apart over time. If she's truly committed to you, she'll work to ease your doubts with honesty, not evasiveness. Now let's go deeper, because when someone keeps something hidden, the changes aren't just in their words or external relationships, but also in the small details of their routine. Subtle adjustments in how they organize their time, or what seems to matter most to them, suddenly can be even more revealing. For example, you might notice that she's spending more time on activities that don't include you. Maybe she says she needs time for herself, or that she's exploring new things. A yoga class, outings with friends she never mentioned before, or staying late at work because there's so much to do. At first, it might seem normal. Everyone needs their space, and you're right. That's completely valid in a healthy relationship. But when these changes are accompanied by an emotional disconnection, When her interest in sharing time with you decreases, that's when you need to look closer. Psychology tells us that priorities don't change overnight without reason. If she starts investing more time in activities she didn't share with you before, it could be because she's trying to fill an emotional void or escape from something she doesn't know how to face directly. Pay attention not only to what she's doing, but also to the why behind her actions. For example, if she's suddenly always on her phone and says it's work-related, but it wasn't like this before, there might be a deeper disconnection. Or if she begins to show interest in activities she once found boring and never invites you to join, it could be a way of creating distance. What should you do if you notice these kinds of changes? First, avoid jumping to conclusions. Not all changes in priorities indicate infidelity or a serious problem, but they do signal that something needs attention. The best approach is to open a dialogue from a place of understanding. Instead of accusing her, try saying, "I've noticed you've been busy with new things lately. I'm glad you have interests, but I feel like we've spent less time together. Is there anything that's worrying you or something we can work on?" This kind of question shows that you're paying attention and gives her the opportunity to talk without feeling attacked. Sometimes, a shift in priorities can be her way of saying, without words, that there's something in the relationship that's not the same. If she's willing to share, listen carefully. But if she avoids your questions or her behavior continues to change without explanation, trust your instincts. Habits and priorities don't change drastically without a reason behind them. At the end of the day, what truly matters is how you face these changes together. Strong relationships aren't those that never face challenges, but those that adapt and grow from them. If there's something to resolve, approach it with understanding and empathy. If you feel her responses lack sincerity, let her actions speak for themselves. Because, dear, the truth always finds a way to come out. And speaking of actions, let's conclude this discussion with a key idea. Words can lie, but attitudes, habits, and small daily details never do. The power of words is immense, but they also have limitations. Words can be manipulated, embellished, and twisted to sound truthful. However, actions, body language, and small everyday habits are the true reflections of what someone feels and thinks. Imagine this. Before, she would seek you out at the end of the day to share how her day went, laugh with you, or simply enjoy a moment of calm together. But lately, that has changed. Now, she seems more distracted, caught up in her own world. She tells you she's tired, that she doesn't have time, or simply avoids those moments that used to be your refuge. These changes can't be explained by words alone. It's in her attitudes that you'll find the answers. You notice she's less emotionally present, that her priorities seem to be elsewhere. Or perhaps, when you're with her, it feels like her mind is anywhere but with you. These aren't things that can be faked or controlled. Body language and emotions always find a way to speak. The key to understanding what's happening isn't to confront her aggressively or to force a confession. What you really need is to observe. Watch how she behaves when she thinks you're not paying attention. Pay attention to the details, how she reacts to questions, how she handles moments where there used to be connection. The small cracks in someone's attitude often tell entire stories if you know how to read them. That said, not every change in behavior is a sign of infidelity or disinterest. Sometimes these shifts come from stress, personal worries, or even an unconscious attempt to manage overwhelming emotions. This is why, before jumping to conclusions, you need to maintain open and empathetic communication. If you decide to talk to her, don't do it from a place of suspicion but from genuine care. Try saying something like, "I've noticed you've been a bit distant lately. I just want to make sure you're okay and let you know we can talk about anything that's going on." This approach not only shows your concern but also gives her the space to express herself without feeling attacked. Here's the final point I want to leave with you. The truth always comes out, no matter how long it takes. If she's hiding something, sooner or later, the pieces won't fit. But you must also be prepared to accept that, if she speaks to you with honesty, it might mean you need to give more of yourself, not less. Relationships, dear, are not perfect. There will always be moments of doubt and phases where things seem to change. What's important is how you choose to face them. Observe, listen, be patient, but also be firm about what you need and deserve. A relationship should be a space of connection and trust, not a place where doubts become a constant burden. Thank you for watching and joining me on this journey of uncovering the subtle truths hidden in everyday interactions. We've explored why people over-explain, the silent pauses before a lie, and the behavioral shifts that reveal what words often try to hide. So, what have you learned so far? I'd love to hear your thoughts. What's one thing you've discovered today that you'll bring into practice in your own life? Share it in the comments below. I can't wait to read your insights. If this video resonated with you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue creating content that inspires and empowers. Remember, life is full of small signs waiting to be noticed. By staying calm, observant, and trusting your intuition, you can uncover the truths that matter most. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.